lesson 7.9 is Greek Jewry in the Birkenau Revolt, Auschwitz II. One of the largely untold stories of the October 7, 1944 Birkenau Revolt is the role of the Greek Jews who were amongst its organizers, heroes, victims, and survivors. Holocaust historian Gideon Greif wrote that according to the diverse sources, the Greek Jews were those that were the initiators of the Sonderkommando revolt that broke out on the Sabbath day, 7 October 1944. Corfu had raised Greek military officer Lieutenant Colonel Yosef Baruch, a demolition and explosive expert, was amongst the organizers of the overall revolt committee and had hidden gunpowder and explosives in the walls of Crematorium 2, where the revolt was intended to begin. Yosef Ben described the role of Baruch in the Sonderkommando revolt and his inspiration for Revenge and Revolt. The plans to blow up Crematorium 4 in Auschwitz were sewn together amongst the Sonderkommando apparently in June 1944, and for this need, connections were made between the Greek Jews of the Sonderkommando and the other Jews who served with them. From the testimonies we have Yosef Baruch, a former lieutenant colonel in the Greek army, who was assigned to the Sonderkommando in the month of May 1944, was amongst the initiators of the plan for the Sonderkommando rebellion. On 30 June, Joseph Baruch identified the corpses of his parents, residents of Corfu, and that of his friend, the lawyer Yom Tov Yakoel, amongst the bodies that were taken out of the gas chambers, and his wrath flamed up within him that this miserable position was cast upon him. In the need to plan for a revolt, Baruch aligned himself with the Capo Kaminsky, a Polish Jew, who in practice began to coordinate the preparations for the revolt. The plan for the revolt was to blow up all 4 crematorium on the 15th of August 1944. But 2 hours before the set time, when the preparations were underway, they announced suddenly a transport of 4,000 Polish Jews that arrived, accompanied by a group of SS. There was a fear that in the presence of so many German army in the camp, it would lead to a disaster for the revolt, and thus it was decided to postpone the date. That was the first failure to carry out the uprising. So in the revolt, when the Sonderkommandos in Crematorium 2 were locked in a room by the Germans at the beginning of the revolt in Crematorium 1 and 4, Baruch was neutralized for all activity. Crematorium number 1 was the revolt of Polish Jews, Eastern European Jews, political prisoners, etc., etc. And 4 were Greek Jews and other Jews, and then they ran to Crematorium number 3. The Greek Jews started the revolt in Crematorium 4 by lighting mattresses, killing several German soldiers, and running with the other inmates the relatively short distance to Crematorium 3. There, with the other Sonderkommandos, they continued to kill German soldiers, but the building was surrounded. Before they surrendered, they sang a Greek partisan hymn, one verse of the Greek national anthem, and Yitzchak Baruch, a Salonican Jew of Skopje descent, placed a bomb in the furnace to blow up the crematorium. Those surviving were quickly executed. French and Hungarian Jews also participated in the revolt in Crematoriums 3 and 4. While there had been at least 2 previous aborted attempts at a general camp uprising, and an additional initiative that had been called and cancelled, this time the Greek Jews decided that they'd go through with the plan and take the lead to instigate the revolt in these 2 crematorium. The 11th Sonderkommando workers knew that their time had come, and they were doomed by the Nazi effort to eliminate all witnesses to the death process. They chose instead to initiate and participate in the 7 October 1944 revolt in Birkenau. Baumann remarked, the 11th Sonderkommando is unique amongst a sequence of squads that worked in the crematorium and rightly takes a special place in the historiography of Auschwitz. Yet its actual history is somewhat confused, particularly regarding the role of the Greeks. We have, for example, 3 photographs of the Sonderkommando at the burning pits taken place in the summer of 1944 and smuggled out of the camp in an attempt to inform the world of the systematic slaughter occurring in Birkenau. According to the survivors, a Greek Jew identified as Aleko actually snapped the pictures. He was identified as Aleko Alexandrius, a partisan pseudonym. Molcho and Nechama identified him as Albert Herrera, but that assertion remains conjecture for lack of any substantive proof. Herrera from Larissa had been a Greek naval officer and later joined the leftists leading a last partisan movement, was caught by the Germans in Greece and subsequently deported. But he had been unsuccessful in trying to escape as a Birkenau Sonderkommando worker, and sometime in the summer of 44, while sent to dump ashes in the Vitsula River, he tried to escape and was executed afterward in Birkenau. The Greek Jews also in the Sonderkommando were incensed by the gassing of the attorney Yom Tov Yakoel, one of the leaders of Salonican Jewry. There are different versions of the revolt, but I'm just talking about the testimonies and the depictions of the Greek role. According to the written testimony of Leon Cohen, who wrote vividly in detail of the Greek Jews in the Sonderkommando revolt in Birkenau, he had been in number 2. He survived the war, and he lived in Israel. On 7 October, during the hours of the afternoon, the people were amassed in the hall of the crematorium in order to go to disinfection. That moment, one of the Greeks gave the sign to revolt and voiced the code on them. Immediately, the Greeks in crematorium 4 jumped on 2 soldiers that had accompanied them and took their rifles. The non-Greek prisoners not only helped, but tried to take the guns away from the Greeks and return them to the Germans. After several shots in the air, which caused panic amongst the prisoners, a group that numbered 25 Greeks went out and ran the distance to crematorium 3, about 250 to 400 meters. They jumped on the guards and took control over crematorium 3. Yitzchak Baruch, a Salonican whose family came from Skopje, managed to place the bomb that blew up the furnace before the Germans arrived. After backup was called and the soldiers tried to burst into the building, the fire was ignited as planned and the whole crematorium went up in flames with all the Greek prisoners inside. In the revolt, 20 guards were killed. Crematorium 3 was destroyed and damage was caused to crematorium 4. As such, half of the death machine in Birkenau was closed down. Before their death, the revolters managed to sing a partisan song and one verse of the Greek national anthem. Several survivors fled before the doors closed and managed to hide in crematorium 4, and the Germans arrived and killed everyone. Fotini Tomei, in her book, added that in addition to singing the Greek national anthem, the Greek Sonderkommando revolters raised a makeshift Greek flag in the air. The physician Albert Menashe, a former Salonican inmate in Birkenau, published a memoir on Birkenau in 1947, including many recollections of the Sonderkommando and the revolt. So he noticed also that they revolted in 3, and that during the revolt they sang the Greek national anthem. I'll read this. There's some historical questions, but at least you hear his version. The personnel of crematorium 3 had revolted during their work. The revolt had begun by the killing of a German capo who had been thrown alive into the furnace. The German sentinel was also killed, after which the furnaces were ignited. I'm not in a position to give details whether either on the type of explosives used or the manner in which the Sonderkommando obtained them. But for crematorium 3, the revolt spread to the other crematorium. The workers of crematorium 3 attempted to escape but were forced to retreat before the oncoming German troops. Singing the Greek national anthem, 300 Greeks buried themselves beneath the debris of their crematorium. The revolt lasted all afternoon. The entire Sonder was massacred. It is possible that some prisoners were able to escape in the general uproar, but I cannot state this with any degree of certainty. There was one Jew named Ugo Venezia from the smoke in crematorium 3, went on the wall of the crematorium and fell over into crematorium number 2 and joined them, and that's the version which all these Greeks from crematorium 2, including Leon Cohen, had, because they ran from 4 to 3. So he knew what happened in 3 and who came, and I guess they talked real fast, or he had that impression. One of those from four actually survived. His name was Mizrahi, and he wrote the first testimonies in Tel Aviv, but no one believed him and he was hardly known. And then there's the story about Najari, who actually left notes. He was number 3, but he had some notes before that he had planted in the ground before the revolt in case he never came back to tell the tale. So then let's say about 25 years ago, we found the notes and a diary was made of it. And all these events were separate from the revolt in crematorium number 1, which were Ashkenazim and political prisoners, and neither succeeded. But what's significant is that there were other Jews, the Greek Jews, and it's the Greek dimension, and in the world and in Auschwitz they don't want to accept this narrative, and at Yad Vashem they don't want to accept the narrative. So it's a big deal that they sang the Greek national anthem, there were captured Greek partisans, they sang a partisan hymn, they had military experience from Greece before, some were even officers, then they were partisans, and they were taken, and this is part of the Jewish tragedy.